Well, good morning. Good morning. Thanks, everybody, for a great day yesterday and for a terrific night at the British Embassy. For those of you who don't know, I'm Andy Burke. I am a former state senator, former mayor, former Biden administration official, but always New Dealer and New Deal fanatic. And so that has led me to be the chair of the New Deal board, and I am extremely honored to be in that position. Yes, you can clap for that, yes. No, not for Tennessee State Senator, not for any of those things, just New Deal. It has been fantastic, and I am really appreciative of Helen and the board for giving me this chance. I don't see Helen in the room this morning, but just so that everybody knows, she has been a powerful force in my life for really friendship and mentorship, and just a wonderful person to have around. She is the most active ex-chair of a board that you can ever imagine, and that is no surprise if you know Helen, so I give her the utmost thanks. Debbie, I know, is in the room somewhere, but I'm thrilled to get to work with Debbie and the entire New Deal staff, who are just fantastic, have always been that way. The reason that I was able to do so much in my public life was because of the lessons that I learned here at the New Deal, and Debbie and the staff continue to put together incredible programming that meets this moment as opposed to the moment that it was when I joined in 2010. I also want to say a big thanks to the board members. If you're a board member of the New Deal or the Forum, we appreciate you. See, I saw that Helen is here. She didn't do anything when I said her name, but she was the first to clap. That's how I knew she was here. So thanks to the board members of the Forum and of New Deal, and then most importantly, other than y'all, the leaders, I want to say a big thank you to the donors and the sponsors, without whom we wouldn't be here. So if you get a chance, make sure that if you see a donor, that you go out, say a couple words to them, thank them for their investment in the New Deal. We literally wouldn't be able to be at this hotel or at any of these events without them, and we need them not just today, but going forward. So I want to spend just a minute before our panel starts and talk a little bit about the New Deal and what I see over the course of the next year. And it starts with kind of how I see the leaders. You're not the future of the Democratic Party. You're the present. You're not the bench of the Democratic Party. You're in the game. And the reason for that is because you are the antidote to the disease that people see on their social media feeds and in their lives every single day, and what is coming out of Washington, D.C. What they unfortunately see is corruption and chaos, and what you offer instead is commitment and competence, and we need that in our country right now. This current administration wants to make sure that some of the richest people in the world, including themselves, make a little bit more every day, as opposed to being concerned about what people who you serve spend every day. And let me just give you one example. So when I was in the Biden administration, I ran something called the Rural Utility Service, #1 funder of water, electricity, and telecom in rural America. The debate that you hear about every day right now is, how are we going to get AI the energy that it needs to serve America and the world? Obviously an important topic. But what people in America are actually concerned about is how much their utility bills at the end of the month are going up, and how much that's taking out of their pockets. And the disconnect between the conversation in Washington, D.C. and the reality of their lives is stark, and you are dealing with that on a regular basis. So our responsibility at the New Deal is to make sure that your abilities, your competence, your ambition that you have for your cities and towns and states, that plays out not locally or not just locally, but across the nation on every platform available, like a big NFL game that's being shown to everybody. So it's great when we win and we run up the score in San Francisco and Austin and New York City. But I love it also when we win in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and Teton County, Wyoming, and Urbandale, Iowa. These are critical places for us to compete. And as somebody who has seen Tennessee slide off the map, there were days when we were competitive. My entire life up until the last 15 years, Tennessee was a place, I don't know if Senator Yarborough and Mayor Harris are here. We grew up in a time where this was a bipartisan state. It can be that again when the New Deal competes and wins all over the country. So thank you for the work that you do. We are committed to serving you. Please get more involved. Solicit donors for us to continue. Get involved. Show why it's important. The answer in politics is usually not or, it is and. That's how we win. And the conversations that you have and the solutions that you bring to the table are critical for the future, not just of the Democratic Party, but for our country. So thank you very much. So now let me bring up a couple of leaders, because one place where you're definitely in the game is in public safety. So if y'all will come on up, I'm going to have what I think is the tallest panel of the week between the three of us. Yeah, I think we might win the award at least for that. So most of y'all know Zach Klein, former city council member, city council president, now the city attorney in Columbus, who has, I think importantly, as somebody who had a city attorney in Chattanooga, one of the things that we try to figure out all the time is how to be proactive rather than reactive. It's really easy as an attorney just to take what comes in. Looking through Zach's career, it is obvious that he has been one of the most proactive attorneys on the public sector scene, and so we're excited to hear from him. And then also from Houston in the city council is Edward Pollack, who, as I said, on the tall side, played basketball at Morehouse and overseas. We were just talking, Kevin Durant is my favorite player, so I've been watching a lot of Houston Rockets this year. Critically, his district is 75% people who speak English as a second language. Is that right? Incredible. And Edward has this also proactive past in the law, being a lawyer himself, founding his own law firm, which I know makes you an entrepreneur, not just a lawyer, and has nicknamed his district, which is District J, J City, which is a super cool name. So as I sit down, let me just start with you, Edward. Why is this topic of public safety important to you? What is it that that you really get out of this particular topic?
Well, good morning, and thank you all for having me. When you think about public safety, no matter where we are in the country, when you survey your constituents, when they ask what are the top priorities, public safety is always at the top, right? But I don't think we can just police our way out of every situation. And I think we have to also look at root causes. So as much as I am for being tough on crime, I think we also have to be able to bring alternatives to people, because most people are not committing crimes because they want to commit crimes. They're committing crime out of lack of resources, lack of discipline, lack of guidance, lack of education and training, lack of respect for others. And so we have to find ways to provide those services and provide wraparound services for communities, especially communities of color, who don't always look at police as the good guys as we talk about public safety. So look forward to getting into that discussion today.
Same question for you, Zach. What makes this personal for you?
Well, to piggyback of what Ed said, people care about crime. People care about public safety. When you think about what Senator Slotkin said yesterday, that Donald Trump often has the wrong answers to a lot of the right questions. One of those questions that, obviously he's big on immigration, he's big on trade imbalances and tariffs, but one of them's crime. There's a reason why his approach of sending National Guard into cities is to address crime. Now, it's not the right answer, it's illegal, it's unconstitutional, it's not gonna solve the problem, but he recognizes that in the ethersphere of American politics, people care about crime, and there's no better group to address crime than the folks who are at the city level and the state level who deal with it on an everyday basis. And my role as Columbus City Attorney, half of my team are prosecutors. We prosecute all misdemeanor crime in the city of Columbus, and that's everything from traffic violations all the way up to something very serious like domestic violence and everything in between. I also have lawyers that are the lawyers for the Division of Police. So we are in the intersection of how policing is done and the legalities of policing and good policies. But when I go out to community meetings, inevitably, we spend 75 to 85% of our time in our meetings talking about crime and safety, because it affects everyday lives of everyday people. Raising your family, having your kids play outside next to a drug house or where there's shootings going on in your neighborhood. Families are striving and thirsty for an opportunity for their children to live in a safe environment, and they look to local elected leaders like, how are you going to address safety in a way that is pragmatic, that is going to deal with very violent, dangerous people, but also what Ed said, but also recognizing how do you truly address the underlying needs to help people change their behavior to really affect public safety and improve crime in all the neighborhoods.
So Zach, you touched on this a little bit, but I want to take a little deeper dive. We have state officials here, we have local officials here, and one of the things that I always struggled with was that I frequently wasn't on the same page with my state about these issues. Wasn't, depending on what year it was, wasn't always on the same page with the federal government about these issues. And so as you think about our federalist system, and you've got one message and one thing coming out of Washington, D.C., which is, this is the most dangerous day in the history of mankind. You've got people at the state who are probably trying to stop some of the things that you're doing, and then you have the reality on the ground, which is, in fact, most places are safer now than they used to be. How do you think about that, both from a messaging standpoint, but also from a day-to-day, what do I do to make sure that that people are safe?
Look, you answer that question by remembering that perception is reality. I don't care if you're a mayor or a city attorney or a council member and you stand and show how many declining charts of murder rates and homicides and shootings. People want to feel safe, and you cannot chart them to death if they do not feel safe. I think you have to always have that in mind, that if people are afraid to go to the grocery store or afraid to go to the mall, it doesn't matter if you're like, but yeah, you should feel 16% safer because murder rates are down. No one feels 16% safer, right? You have to understand that if people truly feel unsafe, what are you going to do to first acknowledge that there is a safety problem and a crime problem, and then what are you going to do to address it? Is it being able to have, if you're fortunate enough to have resources in your community, to hire more policing? How are you going to structure policing so that it's good, effective policing, good quality policing in your neighborhood where everyone has opportunities? What are you going to do to shut down drug houses in your neighborhoods or get dangerous people off the street? I can say in a state like Ohio, we are a blue city in a red state. So 20 years ago in the state of Ohio, we had a whole chapter of several hundred pages of common sense gun regulations that were, bless you by the way, that were on the books, and our state legislature has spent the past 20 years repealing all of those laws. So now we live basically in the Wild West of gun regulation. And so I use my platform as the city attorney. We have several active lawsuits against the state of Ohio to protect the city's ability ability to pass common sense gun laws. For example, if you have a domestic violence conviction, we believe in the city of Columbus that you shouldn't be allowed to possess a gun. The state of Ohio thinks that you should. So we're in litigation over that. So like, what can we do our part from the city attorney's office, or if you're a mayor working with your city attorney who may not be elected, to deal with that?
So I think that you should put together a new movie that's a horror movie, Charted to Death, and just show that. I think it would be quite successful in the Democratic circles. So Edward, you know, one of the ways that we often hear that people can feel safer is through community policing. How have you seen that play out in your community, and what can council members, state officials, and others do to help that community policing model?
Yeah, I think it's important that we find ways to build trust between police and the communities that they serve. We want our police officers to be familiar with the landscape, be familiar with the neighborhoods, the people within it, the schools, the businesses. And so in my district, we came up with this concept called the District J Patrol. We understood that in Houston, HPD is spread very thin. So they're going to prioritize high crimes first, the rapes, the assaults, the murders, before the neighborhood crimes and violations. So the parking on the lawn, the junk motor vehicles, the encampments, the loitering, the trespasses, the panhandling, the nuisance violations that plague every single neighborhood. And so what we came up with was a system where my office pays overtime dollars to a specialized unit of police officers that solely work on neighborhood-related crimes and violations. And so when we pay them this overtime, they go out and they're able to address issues that come directly from the residents. The cool part is the way that the residents are able to submit their reports is online. So they go to districtjpatrol.com on their phone or their tablet or their laptop, and they're able to put in submissions about whatever the issue is. They can upload photos, they can put in comments, and it gets routed to these specialized officers that come out into the neighborhood and then address the crime. On the website, there's a results tab. So we make the police officers have to respond to whatever that complaint was. So if it says, hey, there was a junk motor vehicle on this street, please come and take a look at it. The officer will then respond, hey, went out there on Tuesday at 1:15. We were able to remove the junk motor vehicle and it's no longer there. So there's accountability and transparency there. And I think you need to have that to build trust within police in the communities that they serve. And what we also did was we bought them these called Polaris vehicles. They're these on-road, off-road, open concept vehicles that can go down bayou trails, go into vacant lots. They can get inside apartment complexes, but we just wanted a community presence, and we wanted a community patrol that was different than your standard police presence. And we make sure that these officers also go to many community events. We do things at the schools, and so it has to be a collaborative approach. We don't want the officers just to be in the neighborhood when there's an incident. We want the officers to be there to build relationships. And I think if we focus on strengthening that trust between community and police, we'll see better response from the community as well. And then we also want to make people understand that we do care about your safety in the neighborhood, and we want you to see police presence and patrol around the community.
So Zach, this brings up an interesting topic with you because, as you said, you've got prosecutors. You're part of the enforcement process. So what can cities do, and anybody who has some kind of enforcement mechanism do to build that kind of trust within your own community of enforcers? How do you go about doing that within your office, within the police department? What are the steps that you can take?
Well, like on the policing side, we created this community immersion program. So this is we added hours to our Columbus Police Training Academy that requires officers to go, before they get a badge and a gun, to go out in the community, to work and meet with not-for-profits, with different pastors, with community leaders, neighborhood associations, community associations, so that they know who the players are before they get their badge and the gun and become a police officer. It's been a wildly successful program because, like, I don't know about in your community in Columbus, a lot of our officers don't come from Columbus. A lot of them don't look like the city of Columbus that they're getting ready to patrol. Like, I did not come from Columbus. I came from Appalachia in southeastern Ohio. Doesn't make any of these people bad people. They just may not be used to living in an urban environment that's diverse and rich and has different cultures. So how do we take advantage of people who have big hearts, who want to become police officers, who want to serve, but allow them to get immersed into the communities that they are getting to serve? So we added that to the police recruiting hours so that the officers are ready to hit the ground running when they become CPD officers full time. On the prosecutor side, my view of prosecution is, we have to be really good at calling the balls and strikes and being fair in the criminal justice system, because outside of law enforcement, we are the gateway to the criminal justice system as prosecutors. And so we try to bifurcate people that are coming through the door. Like, are these violent individuals who are dangerous and a threat to society? Are they people who have no regard for the law? Or are they people who simply are down on their luck, they make mistakes, and they need help? And that is really, really telling in misdemeanor world. You have that flexibility in misdemeanor world because a lot of them are quality of life crimes where people make mistakes. Now, in a vast majority of the people that come through the criminal justice system that are in the misdemeanor world, they do need help. And we created a program that is a diversion program that certainly looks at drug addiction and mental health, but we partner with a third-party healthcare organization that does a 32-question screen that goes beyond drug addiction and mental health and looks at job opportunity, transportation issues, food insecurity, and we create, basically like in the education space when you have an IEP, we create an individual plan for every single defendant for these nonviolent, infrequent offenders so they can turn their lives around. We partner them with a social worker that helps them navigate the spaces. And we've seen an 87% success rate, meaning these people do not recidivate 87% of the time. Like, to me, that is true public safety. You're changing behavior, you're changing lives. Now, on the other hand, domestic violence abuser, $500,000 bond, we're going to ask for jail time, we want you to go to jail. Like, that is where people are. They want people to be held accountable, but accountability means different things if you're a violent person, if you have no regard for the law, versus someone who needs help. And it's our role, I think, as leaders, whether it's a prosecutor or a city council member advocating with your city attorney or your county prosecutor DA, is understanding that both those exist at the same time. There are bad people that need to go to jail and prison. And I think we as Democrats sometimes shy away from that messaging, but that doesn't make sense to normal people. What makes sense to normal people is understanding those people exist. You need to have punitive accountability, but there's a whole group, a vast majority group, that also need help. And we need to give them the help that they need to change their lives. And that duality, that both and, exists right now.
So, Edward, you talked a little bit about the transparency piece of what you're doing. Transparency, they turn off the lights. You see how this works. So tell us a little bit more about why that's important, why you put that as part of your initiative, and how it plays out in every day.
Yeah, so my office also created for the city the police transparency dashboard, because we wanted the residents to have a better understanding of the inner workings of the police department. We want to understand the general orders. We want to understand the policies. We want to understand, who's getting stopped, where, why they're getting stopped, the things that happen behind the scenes in internal affairs. We want to put all that data and those metrics that were usually kept behind the scenes within internal affairs or within the police department and make them public facing. And so we came up with a police transparency dashboard where the residents can go on there and they can look at a plethora of different metrics. They can look at the diversity of the department. They can look at which areas are getting more arrests. We can look at who's getting pulled over. We can look at why they're getting pulled over. And so we think it's very important, especially after the murder of George Floyd, when you were hearing a lot of conversation about police reform around the country. Like, what are cities and counties going to do to build this trust? And the accountability a lot of times is put on the public, but we also have to look at our department and the officers that serve within our cities to ensure that they know that there's a level of accountability from the public on how they service. And so I think we have to be very intentional about building that trust between police and community. I think we have to be very intentional about being transparent with the public on ensuring that when police officers are not maybe doing things that we would want them to do in our communities, that they are held accountable. And the only way that we can do that is by being as transparent and open as possible. And when you are able to share the metrics and the data that come directly from the department, that's important. We also looked at having a police oversight board where we have citizens be able to serve on an independent panel that will be able to look at different offenses and grievances that come from the public regarding police conduct. And then that board will then be able to give recommendations to the city council and to the chief on their outlook on this particular matter. And many times before we are looking into police reform, you did not have many of these channels or avenues, and that's why there was this rift and this sometimes fear of the police in certain communities. And we want to really take that veil off and find ways that we are working together in a collaborative way. You can't have a thriving city without having a safe city, but not only do people have to feel safe from their environment and some of the individuals that are there, but they also want to feel safe when police officers are patrolling their area and understanding that they have their best interests as well.
Yeah, so I just want to spend a minute and ask y'all how you think about this duality between enforcement and protection, and then that feeling of, but we're not oppressing a community. And so my experience in Chattanooga while I was mayor is that a lot of this duality was that people were upset because they heard a gunshot in their neighborhood and they didn't see anybody get arrested for the gunshot. But then somebody was driving through the neighborhood and got pulled over for a taillight or whatever it might be. And so you get this mistrust from why are we not being protected when we want to be protected, but we see the police in this way. And so you hear this message from many national leaders painting local officials, painting Democrats as, quote, weak on crime. And I would just love to hear how you think about, and what you hear from constituents about this intersection of how do we keep people safe through enforcement versus how do we make sure that we're not making people feel like they're oppressed in their homes?
Yeah, look, I think that generally speaking, folks want good quality policing. Folks want to see police driving down their road. In Columbus, we need to add more police officers because I believe in community policing. And the reason why those two go together is that if our officers are simply going run to run to run, and they don't have time to get out of their cruiser, or we don't have the manpower to do bike patrol, that means we're falling short on the ability to provide good quality community policing because all they're doing is focusing on call run volume. Now, with that said, when you talk to police officers don't say I really want to become a police officer so I can deal with a mental health crisis or someone who's homeless. So there are alternative methods to police response that is traditionally, because law enforcement has generally been where we sweep all of society's most complicated problems. Well, we don't have the funding for it, so let's just give it to law enforcement, right? So which is why law enforcement deals with homelessness, why law enforcement deals with mental health crises. And so having alternative response is a good thing that is complementary to policing that helps them build trust, so that police focuses on violent individuals. They focus on the gunshots. They can build relationships in the community, whether that's while they're recruits through an immersion program, or whether that's on bike patrol and stopping by the barbershops, the beauty salons, the grocery stores, or in the churches to talk with pastors. And both those exist at the same time. Another way, and we mentioned traffic stops a couple times, in Columbus, I started right after the George Floyd program, got some money from a council member, and started what we call Project Taillight. We partner with some auto dealers. It's based on AMI, but we actually fix people's headlights and taillights for free. Because folks who are fortunate enough that have the resources, if your headlight or taillight's out, you probably go to AutoZone, you pay the money, they come out. I wouldn't know how to do it, but they'll fix it for you. But not everyone has those resources. So that is a police interaction that is driven solely by poverty. Solely by poverty. And so how can we eliminate that police interaction? That makes it ultimately better for officers because they're focused on other things, makes it better for other people on the road because you're driving with people on the road that are also without headlights or taillights, but also better for the people who are the occupants of the car. So it's this approach that, in my opinion, like we need to focus on public safety through the lens of law enforcement, but do it in a way that peels back recognizes that there is conflict still in some communities between police and law enforcement, but we don't have to be soft on crime and dealing with that. We don't have to have that perception that we can be pro-law enforcement, support that, but understand we still need good quality policing.
I like that. I'm actually going to, Commissioner Briones, we're going to partner on that when we get back. So that's the benefit of coming to these conferences. I think we ask police officers to do a little bit too much, honestly. Our police officers, they're taking a call to look at a domestic violence issue, then they're doing a traffic stop, then they're doing a car accident, then they're chasing down a burglar. They're doing so much on a day-to-day, and I think about their mental health a lot. And the stress that comes with the job, the stress that they take home. And we see incidences all the time with officer-involved shootings and this tension between sometimes the police and the public. And so one of the things that we did when we were looking at reform, we didn't want to just focus on the public. We also wanted to focus on how do we strengthen our officers. And so we came up with this program called the PEACE program, the Police Enlightenment and Collective Education program. And this program has officers do yoga, sound therapy, journaling. They put them in a safe space where they're able to find ways to have an outlet for stress, have techniques to de-escalate, to find ways that they're going to better their own mental health and their own welfare, not only for themselves, but the department and then for their families. When you think about these officers, even when my office and others are providing overtime dollars because we are short on police, you're still using the same officers, right? So they're just continuously working, and they're putting themselves in dangerous situations, high stress situations. And these are human beings that have the same emotions and feelings, the same perspectives that many of us have. And so I think we have to be smarter about how we utilize our officers. And if we have limitations based on capacity or resources, then I think we need to use our officers in a much more efficient manner. You shouldn't have the same officers doing every single little thing. And I think a modern approach to policing is necessary to really look at. There's a sign outside my door that says the most dangerous phrase in business is "we always do it this way," right? Or "we always done it this way." We have to get away from that, and we have to understand that in more modern times, we need to have more modern policing and more modern police departments.
Well, great. As we open up for questions, I just want to relay one story, Zach, to the point that you made, which I think is so perfect for what New Deal does to make sure that people keep the money that they make every month in their pockets. Have this friend in Chattanooga, Pastor Wilson. He told me that he had backed into as he was backing out of his driveway, he had backed into something and caused a problem in his car. And what he said was, thank goodness that he had the resources to go get his car fixed, because for many of the people who were parishioners in his church, they do that and that can derail everything. They can lose their job after not being able to use their car. All these secondary effects happen, and so I think that we underestimate the way these small things really can affect people's lives and turn a molehill into a mountain. So please raise your hand if you have questions for this panel. We got people walking around with microphones, as always. Yes.
So good morning, and thank you for your insight. Senator Jamal Bailey in the Bronx. So when we did the police reform a couple years ago, I wrote the new discovery law. That was the speedy trial, the repeal of 58, all of the police reform. When I was the chair of the Codes Committee, we did that. And we've had a real tough problem with the two words in New York. If you're a New Yorker, you've heard bail reform. And when people hear the word bail reform, they think that it is the cause of everything. So it's a messaging problem because constitutionally, bail is simply supposed to guarantee a return to court, nothing more, nothing less. But sometimes we have people thinking that, well, we should be utilizing bail as a carrot to make people plead to things that they didn't do, and that was happening. So I think that we have to figure out that line between, hey, wealth-based detention is abhorrent, and what you're saying is that people want safe streets, and they generally like police. They like good police. They like police that they can trust. And so I just let you know, like, a couple things that we've done in New York City, that I've done in my district. We have a police simulator at Monroe College, and we bring constituents. We have high-risk youth. We bring them together with police departments and community board members, and we let them see what a police officer's day-to-day is, right? They do like a service weapon, the same weight, same size of it, and then they go into these high-tense situations, and then they get to see, like, how many shots do you think you fired? Well, 3. No, you fired 12 because of adrenaline. And then we go into a breakout room and have conversations that really help to have face-to-face police community interaction. So, like, less of a question, but just more of a word of appreciation, just letting you know, like, there are certain strategies that we're trying to employ in New York, and I'd be welcome to having further conversations offline about, how we can bridge that gap between police and community, because it's still happening.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments. I think the bail reform issue as Democrats is something that we really have to figure out what the messaging is, because we're losing races based on that. We have civil court judges who are and criminal court judges who are running on bail reform, but even on the civil side, when there's no bail, they're still running commercials, right? Because no one knows who's in the 313th court, right? So, when you look at bail reform, I mean, you can look at it through two lenses. One, we don't want to create a system where just because you have money, you can get out of prison or jail. And if you don't, then you're stuck, right? And if you're presumed innocent until guilty, then it's like, okay, why isn't everyone getting out? But at the same time, you have to be realistic and have some common sense as a judge in a society on, okay, if this person has a rap sheet of violent offenses, then what sense does it make to continue to allow a person to come and return back to the streets and back to their community? Because I can tell you the most frustrating part as a council member is when you do get folks in the neighborhood who report crime. They may see, hey, there's a little old lady who's reporting that there's people selling drugs at the park across her street, and then the officers come and arrest that person, and then 2 days later that person is back. One, they're gonna feel like people don't care about our neighborhood. And 2, they're going to get discouraged, right? So we have to find ways in which that we have messaging as Democrats that we can be smart on bail reform, understand that it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach, and for people to have common sense, especially on the bench, to be able to plainly say that if you have a rap sheet of dangerous violations and criminal offenses and convictions, then you're not going to be able to just get the same leniency as someone else who may just be a first-time offender. And we have to figure out what that message is and carry it, because all across the country, we're losing races across the board based on bail reform.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting my approach is the right approach, but what we do in Columbus in my office is, again, non-violent, infrequent offender, we don't ask for bail. Violent offender, long rap sheet, we ask for bail.
Great. Yes. Let's see, another question back here in the middle.
Thank you. Thank you guys for sharing your insight. Keisha Hodge, Washington from the city of Phoenix. We have, as one of the states, we see a lot of fentanyl usage, and especially in our parks. And it kind of piggybacks on what you were just saying, council member, regarding someone will report it, the officer will take them in, they will be arrested, and before the end of the day, they're right back in the same park, they're right back in that same location. And it's a combination of factors. A combination is, one, it's not the city that does the charging authority on it, it's the county, and they are focused on high profile busts. Like they want the 200 pounds of fentanyl that's been seized, and it's the common everyday user that people are complaining about. My kid shouldn't have to see this in the park. They shouldn't have to pick up the foil. They shouldn't have to deal with those things. And it's also really affecting our officers' morale. Like, we ask them to focus on this area because this is what the neighbors have complained about, and they literally say we spend more time dropping this person off, doing the paperwork, and as we make our next rounds again, they're right back there. And like you said, the neighbors feel like we don't care about them. I'm just open to any suggestions. Like, I've tried to lean on personal relationships with the attorney, with the county attorney. I've tried to do all the things, but it still feels like there are certain neighborhoods where we don't get the same level of response, and many times our officers' response to it is like, well, I can arrest them or I can ask them to move them along. And it seems like we're just moving them from one area to the other, and it really just affects the quality of life. So I just wanted to throw that out there and see if there's any insight on things we can be doing differently. As a city, we've invested in things such as we have our, and it's not because they're homeless, because we have Office of Homeless Solutions. We provide wraparound services. But addiction is addiction, and it should also not impair the quality of lives for our residents as a whole. So I was just curious of any insight as to what we could be doing differently to try to get our partners in this to take it more seriously. Thank you.
Look, I feel your frustration, and a lot of it has to do with the bench. You know, the bench and how the bench responds to even prosecutorial requests for bail or for sentencing. You know, series of community meetings got my ass handed to me about felony crime and juvenile crime. Don't prosecute either. So I now start my community meetings with, by the way, I don't prosecute juvenile crime and I don't prosecute. And it's like the air comes out of the room because they had their pitchforks and they were ready to launch at me. Because there is a frustration of like, well, how does, in juvenile crime in particular, how does this one kid have 20 stolen cars and is he still on the street? And of course, the system should be rehabilitation focused, but what we're doing ain't working. So I've used my bully pulpit, obviously very delicately with my ethics to being a member of the bar and criticizing the bench, but using my bully pulpit to kind of ask questions out loud of like, how can we do things differently from an accountability standpoint that is driven a lot by judicial decisions that affects us and that we on the front lines are getting blamed for. I will like pivot then to something that is in more of our control, I think as city leaders in particular, is this idea, and every city's different, every state's different. If you have or don't have one, you should consider really doubling down and utilizing your nuisance abatement code. So we have a unit called the Property Action Team. Columbus is divided into 6 police zones. I have a lawyer assigned to each zone. That's their sole job, is to go work with police, work with block watches, community leaders, and we shut down drug houses. We shut down violent bars and businesses. If there's gunshots there's shootings, if they're running drugs, if there's overdoses, and we take those cases to court and we close those houses up, make them boarded up for a year, which obviously really hits the landlord's pocket, but the calls for service decreased 95%. So if you're that family and you're that elderly family, or whether you're raising kids and you're living next to a drug house, if you're able to shut down that property, you are cleaning up the neighborhood. Residents love it for all the right reasons because you're improving the quality of life in the neighborhood, but you're bringing that sense of accountability to deal with gangs, with drugs, even though you may not have the jurisdiction because you're not a felony prosecutor or dealing with felony court of something that's very serious at that level. You're still making a significant impact with the civil tools that you have as a municipality.
Yeah, see,
Yeah,
we
just
only have
quickly, yeah.
1 minute left, but I feel your frustration as a council member because you get calls from the constituents about issues in the community, but you have to deal with the police officers, you have to deal with the prosecutors. Sometimes the DA doesn't even want to accept the charges, right? And they have these times when they're like, we're accepting low-level charges, and sometimes we're not. Sometimes the officers, they get the charges accepted, but now you take an officer off the street to have to go downtown, book this person, do all the paperwork, and then they get before the bench, and then there is a PR bond, and they're back on the street, a day later. So there's a lot of disconnect within local government on trying to find ways to address these issues. But these are the issues that touch our communities every single day. We're going to have to find some common sense solutions that work well. And so I think these conferences are the best way for us to brainstorm, pick each other's brains on ways in which to do it. And so if you have any ideas on how we can best solve these challenges, I'd love to talk to you.
Great. Well, thanks for the work that y'all are doing to build trust and safety. Having worked on these issues for a long time, I know that people who live on a street, if they don't feel safe walking out there, they don't feel very good about their home, about their situation, and so we really appreciate the work that you do. Last thing I'll just say is that this is an area where the one story beats the 99 every time, and so 99 times right and one wrong goes to the bail reform question. Is one bad story beats 99 successes, and so for all of us, as you do this great work, make sure you give those anecdotes as well of all 99 times that it worked really well, because the one bad one is coming, no matter what, and so the great work that we're doing, we need to tell those stories again and again. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you to Andy and to Edward and Zach for a tremendous panel. I do want to also, we had a chance to recognize some of our Ideas Challenge winners yesterday. City Attorney Klein was one of them for our public safety category. So congratulations to him for the program he talked about on this panel, the Law Enforcement Community Immersion Program, where he's bringing officers into the neighborhoods before they officially become officers to gain experience dealing with the communities they're dealing with. I want to also give a shout out to Representative Kate Farrar from Connecticut, who hopefully is here, who was going to be featured in our child care breakout in just a little bit. She was the winner for one of our categories for the Early Childhood Education Endowment in Connecticut, which is investing a huge amount in early childhood for the state to help people afford it, to pay educators more, and to centralize enrollment. So congratulations to City Attorney Klein and Representative Farrar. We are going to move on now and return to a topic that has been central to this conference, the cost of living, or as Jesse Ferguson told us to describe it, the cost to live. We have discussed at length the need to put this at the center of the Democratic agenda and messaging, but at a time when the Trump administration is not just indifferent to this issue, but actually creating headwinds through policies that we've heard about, like tariffs and health care cuts. We know that you all don't just want political talking points, but also to do the best you can to address it in your communities. So we're going to do that in our next panel. Relatedly, I do want to take this opportunity to put in a plug as we get set up for our Substack, The Roadmap, which is a platform where we are having New Deal leaders share efforts to take on the cost of living and other important issues. So please reach out if you want to be featured on our Substack. So I want to welcome up the next panel, where we will dig into state and local solutions to the cost of living. Our speakers include the mayor of Boise, Ohio, Lauren McLean, who has been a leader and innovator on... Boise, Idaho. Did I say Ohio? Yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah, well, there may be a Boise, Ohio. I don't know, but probably they're not doing as well as Boise, Idaho, because they don't have a very good mayor. But Boise, Idaho, Lauren McLean, she's been a leader on housing and energy in particular. We are joined by Sarah Rosen-Wartel, the president of the Urban Institute, a nonprofit research organization providing data and evidence to accelerate solutions and create a future where every person has the power and opportunity to thrive. And we are fortunate to be moderated by Heather Long, the chief economist at the Navy Federal Credit Union. Many of you may remember Heather from her award-winning work on the editorial board at the Washington Post and elsewhere, and may still listen to her on Marketplace Radio. So Heather, thanks for being here, and looking forward to a great discussion.
All right, well, we were saying the last panel seemed to be a bunch of people over 6 foot. This is the slightly shorter panel, but we hope. So look, I don't think anybody needs any introduction to the affordability challenge. It's finally front and center. It's probably surprising it wasn't front and sooner, really. Let me just make 3 broad points from the economic perspective, and then we'll dive into the solutions, which is what we're really here to talk about. From the economist's view, I'd say 3 key things when I get asked, why now? Why is it at the forefront now? Number 1 is we've had 4 kind of brutal years of inflation, and in particular, I'd call it whack-a-mole inflation. When one area starts to get under control, something else spikes and something else spikes. So even if you're the best budget person or you're the best at clipping coupons or whatever, it's just been so hard because so many different categories are spiking, and that's layered on top of the ongoing challenges for decades with childcare, healthcare, education costs, and more. The second one, which I think everyone in this room understands really well, and we're glad to have Mayor McLean here, is there's nowhere left to flee. I think I grew up in the middle of central Pennsylvania during the pandemic. A lot of people moved from New York City or DC to places like central Pennsylvania for cheaper housing, and to Phoenix and to Boise and to these other places. And now they have the same problems that New York City and San Francisco have had for decades. So there's just nowhere left, very few places left to go that are not experiencing these challenges. And the last one is the one that I wrote my last Washington Post column before Jeff Bezos decided to go in a very different direction, to put it mildly. It was on the K-shaped economy. I called it the return of the K-shaped economy, that we can see in the data, including in our own at Navy Federal, that the top 20% are doing great right now, and the dividing line is about $170,000 a year. So people above that income tend to be doing pretty well. I know it doesn't go very far in New York or San Francisco. People below that, you can see, are really just treading water. And so I think people are much more aware of that than maybe they were before. It's not that it didn't exist for many years, but I think there's kind of an awareness that how much people are falling behind who are not in the top 20%. Okay, so let's turn to our excellent panelists. What are your top 2 ideas for the officials in this room? Everybody's looking for solutions.
Sure. Well, first off, I want to say thanks to New Deal. I see Debbie back there, and Helen, and all the donors that have made this possible. It's really great to be back. It's been a couple years since I've been able to attend, but this is an organization that through the years has provided me so many great ideas and support and skills that I use every day. So I want to thank all of you that make this possible, including the staff this week. It's hard to say what are the 2 best ideas, because in every city, at every level of government, those ideas are going to be different. But in Boise, as I work to ensure that we're a safe and welcoming city for everybody that is also affordable for everybody, we've taken kind of a portfolio approach, if you will, because housing, that's something that didn't come up in your intro, but the cost of housing is a huge part of our monthly budget. So I think about kind of the wallet and the budget in terms of how folks are spending money and how we address affordability in cities. So housing in Boise, even before the pandemic, while people on the coasts and maybe in other places thought our housing was affordable, there were rumblings in our community about how out of whack wages and housing costs were. It was exacerbated by the pandemic when suddenly, little Boise, Idaho, and the region has become a coastal market with so many people from California showing up with cash, and then local Boiseans trying to compete in that market. It's super hard. Our average wage in our county is about $75,000. The average home price is $550,000. And so I'd say the ideas around housing, because that's such a big part of our monthly budgets, we've got to have more homes for more people. The McLeans of Boise right now need 1 home, But if our kids come home, we're going to need 3 homes. So to address housing, we both have to, at the city level, we saw that where the market wasn't responding was in deeply affordable homes. So in the last 6 years as mayor, we now just broke ground on what will be our 1,000th home that's for folks making less than, at or less than 60% of area median income, and that's in public-private partnerships on city land, built and managed privately. So we're plugging along there, but we also need a market-based approach that just creates a roadmap for more homes for more people. So we updated, fixed, trying to use those words from yesterday, our zoning code that creates incentives and the ability to have more density along transit lines, more homes for more folks. But so there's a housing piece, but then if we want our place to be affordable, I think about it in terms of families too. We want kids to have a place to run and play without parents having to dish out more money for activities. And so we have a goal of making sure we've got a park with every kid in our city can walk to a park within 10 minutes. And we're 74% of the way there right now. So mapping out where we need those parks to create free places for residents to gather, have fun, and to play. And then I do want to also just touch on utilities. So for so long in Idaho, we would say we had plentiful and cheap power. Well, it's no longer plentiful, and it's definitely not cheap. And so I've convened utilities to talk about ways that we can support those that need support in the short term, while also looking at how we can help cut those costs. One of the things that we've taken on is, because our days are getting hotter with climate change, is doubling our tree canopy, because it'll cool our neighborhoods, which then helps people save money on their monthly bills, the air conditioning bills in the summer. We're looking at right now how we can provide renewable energy, geothermal clean heat to affordable housing developments in the city, and working with Bloomberg Foundation through the Mayor's Challenge on that. So really looking at all these different parts of where we spend our money every month to do as much as we can with convening, with policy, with incentives, to ensure that we help make Boise more affordable for our kids and theirs.
Just proof positive that the answers to most of what ails this country live in our cities and communities, and we're going to find the path. I'm thrilled to be here. Heather, to your point, we have a tool on the Urban website called the American Affordability Tracker, which allows you to look at the specific cost of living increases in categories at the congressional district as well as state level. And just nationwide since 2017, earnings have gone up 38%, but childcare costs have gone up 40%, cost of the lowest price healthcare plan on the ACA marketplace 41%. Housing costs, rent 50%, home prices 80%. So if you think about the basket of goods Americans are consuming, everything's a little more expensive than their income, and then housing is a lot more expensive. So when you think about solutions to affordability, and I'm a lawyer, not an economist, but I'm going to sound like one for a second. In some ways, you think about it in 3 categories. So I know you asked for 2, but I'm going to do 3. The first is, what can you do to actually bring the cost yourself down? And there are various ways to do that, or at least make it not keep going up. One is price controls, which I'm generally not a big fan of. Another is to increase the supply. It takes a while, but that's what we're talking in housing production and the like. And that can be true on the services end too. A lot of licensing requirements, for example, in communities, restrict who can do certain kinds of services. If you think about all now of our drugstores, you can go get certain kind of basic urgent care services. Used to be licensing said you could only do that if you were a doctor. Well, that same model is probably possible. We don't need tanning salons and hair braiding places necessarily to have the kind of licensing restrictions we do. So that's another category, increased supply. And third, you can reduce demand, and sometimes you do that by substitution. So if, for example, if there's sort of a twin benefit. If you provide some ways to incentivize people to use transportation, transit subsidies, you're also reducing demand for the car, for the gas, for the other things. And in the long term, those kinds of structures help. A second category is to take expenses off people's books. And there's some very popular public ones. Oh, we're going to pay for this for everyone. That's hard, but it seems to me that if you're going to choose to do that, especially with such scarce resources, you should do it where there are externalities. where there are places where there's a larger public benefit. And the most obvious place for that is in early childhood education. So when the state of Oklahoma, as many of you know, has had since 1998, universal pre-K, the city of Tulsa itself found that kids who participated in universal pre-K were 12% more likely to go on to higher education. And if you do that, you're having first of all, you have a year of childcare a parent doesn't have to pay for, or a year in which their earnings don't have to be reduced because they're the childcare. But the child has also now got a head start, and that's going to be ultimately a benefit in multiple ways to the local economy. And then finally, the third category is helping people to increase their earnings. And there are lots of categories here, all the workforce training programs that many of you lead on. But particularly when you can tie those training programs to a particular employer in the area's need. And we're big fans of apprenticeships and other things, but there are lots of different ways to do it. So if you think about it in those categories, and then you think about the different elements of cost, and that's a kind of a good way to enter into the conversation.
Yeah, that's great framing. Let's pick up on that last point you mentioned, really trying to boost incomes. I'm thinking particularly about the national conversation now about Gen Z and young people. We all know the statistics, struggling to get hired, their unemployment rate is back up, and just struggling to get a foothold. I know even in my organization, we do mortgages every day, and yet many of our young employees believe they will never own a home. To your housing point. So I'm wondering if you could talk more specifically about Gen Z, young people in Boise and more nationally about particular solutions for that generation.
Yeah, it's funny because my dad, I grew up in Syracuse, and my dad he likes to send me newspaper clippings, and he sent me a clipping on the housing crisis in Syracuse and the affordability crisis there, but also shared in that the age difference now in terms of, like, my husband and I were 24, 25 when we bought our first house, and now, I think the average at that time was 27, and now it's approaching 40. And that's real. That's our kids. It's their peers trying to think about how they make their way in the communities that they choose to call home, and it's happening in Boise too. What I have found is such a difference in expectation around what housing looks like and what neighborhoods look like. So just a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I was at a neighborhood association in Northwest Boise, so kind of on the northwestern edge. And the room was really filled with folks that are retired, and their frustration was that there are too many apartments, too much traffic, we don't need more apartments in our backyards. What are you going to do about this, Mayor? And I shared with them that the year and a half before, so I guess it's a little longer than that, in my election year we passed comprehensive zoning reform. We have now a modern zoning code that I referenced in my first remarks. And it was, I did it when I did it because I knew that if I didn't and I wasn't reelected, it would be dropped, and I saw it as really, really important. But through that came an organization of just like regular Boiseans. They have a housing book club now that still happens 2 years later, and they started organizing under this banner of legalized homes. And when we got to the point where our city council was hearing our zoning code, it was 3-4 days we had of hearings, like many, many hours, hundreds of people showed up. But what I saw, and I shared this with the room a week and a half ago, was the stark generational divide in who showed up to oppose and then who showed up to support. And the stories I heard from people that were about 40 years and younger were that they just wanted to, they had a job, they just wanted to be able to live in the neighborhood or close to the neighborhood where they'd grown up as kids. They love our city as much as we do. There's not enough homes, so they're too expensive, rent is high, they need an apartment so they can save money so they can buy a house. Please make it possible to have more homes for more people. And they also don't necessarily they aren't asking us to create homes with big yards and lots of space. They just want a home. And they want to be in a neighborhood where they can walk to parks and other things. They want to be safe. And they see this as the path forward. And it's on us, and it's so hard for local leaders, I think, to do this when you have so many folks that show up and oppose new homes for more people. Or as I like to remind people, my two Boise kids need homes too. And that generational divide and that the plea to leaders to address these needs so that we can have cities and communities for all comers of all ages is key in the work that we're doing and how I think about how we shape and frame our city today for Boise tomorrow.
So I think you nailed it. The median age of a first-time homebuyer is now 40, but it was only 33 in 2000, 5 years ago. And it was 3 decades ago, 30. And if you think about that, the consequence of that later acquisition of homeownership means the forced savings and the acquisition of wealth that comes in most circumstances as people own a home has been delayed. That means when their kids get to be older, if they decide to have kids, those kids don't have the benefit of equity that the family has built up in order to be invested in their educations or in order for the family to ultimately start a business and increase their earnings or to get passed on to them in future generations. So the data about upward mobility is as bad as the data about the K-shaped economy, and people know it. 60% of people under the age of 30 do not think there is such a thing as the American dream in the United States. 60% don't believe in it. And they're not kind of wrong on the stories about upward mobility. As Raj Chetty likes to say, if you want to live the American dream, move to Canada. Now people have a 50-50 shot whether they'll do better than their parents, and that used to be the opposite. So housing is one of the major barriers to that. The young people today, however, often get blamed somehow or other. They're for failure to launch. They're still in mom and dad's basement. They don't want to work hard. And we have to think about there are really deep structural reasons in our economy, including student debt, that have made it so challenging. It's one of the reasons I like earn while you can learn. Learn while you earn kinds of employment programs, because they allow people to improve their earnings without requiring them to acquire more debt that is a barrier to their sort of moving forward in society. Having said all of that, it's not just young people. Older Americans are also facing a whole bunch of similar challenges. And I'm not good at remembering numbers, so I apologize for my notes. But the number of seniors who are spending more than half their income on housing has doubled in the 20 years. Insurance premiums are particularly hard for people who live on fixed incomes, and obviously if you do own your home, the climate change consequences for home insurance pricing is huge. And families are stuck for all kinds of reasons, so they can't move to be nearer to their kids as easily because they still have a mortgage on their house, and it's at 2.5%, not at 6%. And the cost of housing where they might want to move is so high, which means it's harder to get the benefits of family childcare and other things because people can't move. And if you're a high-income person, you face potentially a capital gains challenge if you try to sell your house. So we have both ends of the income spectrum that are really struggling with the affordability crisis. And there are lots of targeted ways, as the mayor has started to tackle some of that.
Yeah, I can tell you at Navy Federal Credit Union, for the first time in recent months, we've seen people calling in trying to get personal loans to pay taxes or insurance. It's very, sort of hits home how it's coming to the forefront. We're about ready to open it up for questions and discussion, but let's do one more round. Looking ahead to sort of 2026, 2027, there's a lot of federal policy changes that are going to impact residents across the country. There's also the AI boom and how that's shaping energy and other policies. And so I'm wondering if you could give some thoughts about, as you look ahead, what could be some new challenges, or what challenges in this whack-a-mole inflation could really start to surge back beyond housing? I know housing will remain up there, but is there any, I know you've talked about, I'd love to hear more about energy or any other things on your mind.
Sure, but I want to be clear too that I don't think that it's all challenges and I'm not without hope. Like this is a time, the challenges are steep, but people that are able to figure out how to turn some of these challenges into opportunities will, and I should say communities that do that, I think will shine. And so when I think about what's next, I mean, it's hard to say beyond housing, to be honest, because that's the largest line item for all of our residents on a monthly basis. We're going to keep plugging away at housing. And I am so grateful to the housing developers, the philanthropists, and others that have joined me and joined our city in addressing this challenge with all hands on deck, kind of all tools are available approach. And I see opportunities next year in terms of, we are looking at the zoning code that we passed and then doing the little tweaks. So rather than making it perfect and never getting it done, we did it, and now we're correcting where we need to so that we see more homes in more places. We make it easier with some permit updates and things like that. In the childcare space, we allow childcare now by right because childcare will continue to be a big line item for a lot of people, and we need more childcare in Boise. It needs to be safe and it needs to be affordable. My husband and I experienced this ourselves, and the city wasn't even growing in the way that it is now. And so by allowing it by right, folks don't have to go through the long permitting processes and hearings and everything else to just open a childcare so parents can find a place their kids can go in safe ways, and then they can get to work and focus on work. And so looking at how we incentivize more childcare, and with the limited tools that we as a city have. On the utility piece, we sit atop, and the city oversees the largest direct source geothermal system in the United States, the 6th largest in the world. And so this is clean heat that we're able to provide, kind of indexed to natural gas, historically price-wise, we're able to provide in our city. Somebody donated water rights to us, so we now have 4 times the capacity. So we've got to figure out, and we're working with the legislature, how we can use that capacity to provide more clean heat to more people. And that is the one utility, I often ask myself, like, what can we do and where? And so for us, the utility answer is in the geothermal space directly. And so looking at now ways that we can bill in creative ways to make it more affordable for folks in income-restrained, kind of affordable housing developments in our city. We're also looking at, I'm not in charge of my roads. We have a roads district, which is really unusual. And so we have to kind of use just collaborative power to look at how we can make everything safer for walking, et cetera, so people can move around in different ways. And I'm not in charge of the bus system. It's a regional bus system. But what we have done there is now anybody that lives in a city-managed housing development gets bus passes. And it's small in number, but it does provide real impact. So I think that the challenges will remain what they are that we're seeing today. I think cities, it might be whack-a-mole in terms of what cities experiencing what when, with fewer funds coming from the federal government to support the good work and solutions that cities are creating and implementing on the ground. It will get harder. I think about housing and the announcement the administration made last week that vouchers can't be used for permanent supportive housing at the level that they have been in the past. That makes it harder for us to get families exiting homelessness into these homes that are being developed. And so there are indeed challenges, but I really still deeply believe that with the right mix of people and shared vision, we're going to be able to navigate this time and then move through it, move beyond it, and have had the playbook that works for the times when there is more funding and support at the national level.
So I join you in both the worry that things are going to get harder and in the optimism. Just two reasons on the get harder side for awareness. This sort of what we're describing as a stuck labor market where people aren't firing, but they're not hiring either. What that really is going to see, I think, is slow in the rate of wage growth that we've been experiencing before, but not necessarily a slow in the rate. It's the Fed's got a real challenge to kind of get inflation down to 2%. Politically, among other things. And so, and when and if the tariffs kick in, who knows? But a lot of the forces we've been describing are not going to be going away. And healthcare is likely to grow in its increasing costs. Not only some amount of the premium tax credits are likely to go away, but we're seeing a real effect on the non-subsidized part of the healthcare market as insurers and providers are starting to internalize those costs and imagine they're going to have to spread them over the people who are paying, and so they're rising costs for the people who can pay to absorb what they expect will be more uncompensated care. But optimism. First of all, this problem hits everywhere, and that's actually good to get America to resolve it. We looked at the top 10 states where all of the categories of costs that we were looking at have risen faster than earnings. And yeah, New York and California is on it, but so is Kentucky and Utah and Idaho. I'm sorry, not Idaho, Ohio. See, I did it again. But
two live streams proofs now that this happens to Idahoans all the time.
But what that means, I think, is that even the president is using the affordability word, although his experience in actually paying for these things is probably more limited. Just saying. But I also think that sort of coming together means that people are going to start to sort of see the spread of a lot of these practices coming at the local level. And ultimately, for me, that's a basis for optimism. We have put on our website, not only with the affordability tracker in all 6 categories that I've talked of costs and earnings, we have a laundry list of solutions that we're seeing around the country. And we also have a financial health and wealth tracker that talks about some of the solutions in each of the different categories of sort of financial worry that families have. One I didn't mention, but that's really, I think, key for kids is these early savings accounts that give families, and actually there's a way to use the, dare I say, Trump accounts for this, although it's not ideally designed, but it's an available vehicle. So there are and a lot of local communities, even very small dollar savings amounts, help families deal with volatility of expenses. And those small amounts for kids tend to be powerful incentives for larger amounts of savings. So there's a whole laundry list of further solutions there, and we're seeing it from all kinds of communities all over the country. The League of Cities has a really cool affordability product that has a lot of solutions in the housing space. I think they call it their Housing Accelerator Playbook, and we've been participating in generating ideas from great cities like Boise and populating them through these mechanisms. So the momentum is on this set of solutions.
Yeah, we've got one question here.
Yadira Ramos-Herbert, mayor of the fabulous city of New Rochelle. More in the spirit of sharing, affirming, so in New Rochelle in the last 10 years, we've authorized 11,000 housing units, 32 new buildings, and a very transit-oriented development style. Really proud of that. We're sort of 2/3 of completed in leasing. But I think the part that I've been trying to hone in on, because we're sort of in our teenage years with construction and noise and residents a little kind of upset. We're a suburb, but we have an urban core. But as a result of the development to directly impact affordability, we've been able to use the resources to do some really jazzy things. So we have a down payment assistance program where we give 19% towards a first-time home buyer's down payment. And I have residents who tell me, I've rented for 20 or 30 years, and for the first, I get emotional when I think about it, I apologize. I own in the city that I live in, right? And that's because of resources that the development dollars bring in. Last summer, for 3 summers, 500 of our teens and 20-year-olds made $16 an hour during summer employment. Last year, for the first time, we were able to provide busing to every child child who went to a city summer camp, for those of us who are in the grind with our kids, our summer camp is about $700 for 7 weeks, $100 a week, but now adding busing so that if you couldn't get to it, you now have access to those opportunities. We have a workforce development program where we were training residents to be we call it urban handy person, but we're now thinking of some green infrastructure projects and how to reshape the curriculum to train our residents to be the people who can now get government jobs to maintain the green infrastructure that we know we want to bring in. And so yes, the housing for sure, obviously there is a need, and we're happy to contribute to that pipeline, but I think the last couple of years I've really been honing in on how that dollar really helps us invest in our people and bring those affordability down. So we call our zoning reform the New Rochelle model. We streamlined a lot of the processes, preempted a lot of environmental review and impact studies. Developers can be approved within 90 days, built up in leasing in 3 years. You know, as a suburb adjacent to New York City, that's a pretty unheard of metric. So, but beyond the actual kitchen tables that these units provide, it's kind of like the rock in the middle of the lake and the ripple effect that really helps bring down affordability and helps our people survive in these really kind of chaotic times.
My family lived in New Rochelle for 10 years, so love to hear all that. And let me give you one other example, similar idea, because you've got to pay for some of these things, and that's important. For communities that are seeing the influx of these large data centers, there's a model in, I'm never pronouncing it right, Henrico County in Virginia, where they use the tax increment they were going to get in additional revenue from the new data center to use it to pay for both their Affordable Housing Trust Fund in new production, but also to try to mitigate some of the utility costs that were going to inevitably rise with the increased demand for utilities. So looking for those innovative things before the costs get built into the structure and capture some of that value is another solution for some of those problems.
I think, yep.
Hey, this question is for Lauren, and you talked about, you know, revising your development code to reduce restrictions and so forth, and then you mentioned as an example lowering the restrictions on placing child care facilities, and so that sounds really, really hard. Obviously, restrictions on child care facilities are for the safety of the children.
I don't mean that.
Okay, I'll stop right there. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. I meant in terms of they don't have to go through, they're allowed by right in all zones now. So not that we have changed in fact, the legislature changed the requirements, dropped all requirements and took away our ability to license child care centers. But we, before the legislature did that this last year, we licensed them. We had higher standards than in the rest of the state in terms of teacher-student ratio. But what I was finding, and we worked with the school district and with child care advocates to change the ratio once they're in kindergarten to create more spots for more kids so that, you know, the wait list could be dropped in different places. But what we were finding was that somebody wants to open an in-home child care, they have to go through the whole rigmarole of the planning and zoning process. And then, so then you've got a process that takes a long time, could be appealed, then the city has to hear it, make a decision. So that was happening. So we now allow those, and we actually, until the legislature took away our ability to oversee child care, we were providing tax rebates for anybody that had a license in-home child care facility to signal the value of that to us. And then for larger centers, again, in all zones now, you can build them without having to go through that long permitting process that might beg opposition from residents.
There's also a county outside of Atlanta that did a really powerful video when the state decided to subsidize non-traditional hour childcare to encourage the creation of these centers that serve people later into the night often, which is really important in areas where you've got a large hospitality industry, because they couldn't find the workforce because parents couldn't find a place to put their kids. And so you have a very conservative county in Georgia celebrating the creation of a publicly subsidized non-traditional hours childcare system because it's been really good for economic growth, and these families can feel safe leaving their children in licensed, high-quality childcare. So that's, you know, the ecosystem kind of works from the business community end as well.
I think we have time for one more. Is there a microphone near?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the discussion. Shabra Kalantari Johnson with Santa Cruz, California. And of course, we have a housing crisis in California. In the city of Santa Cruz, we've done quite a bit. In the last several years, we've just recently upzoned our downtown area. We were one of 6% across the state to meet our regional housing goals. We've been designated as pro-housing. So we're doing well, but as you mentioned, we have a lot of community pushback, mostly from the older generation. A couple of things that they push back on is, well, you're only building for the students, University of California, Santa Cruz, and you're only building for the Silicon Valley folks who can now live on this coastal community and do their work remotely. And the supply and demand will never balance out in a desirable location such as ours. So I'm just wondering if you face those arguments and criticisms and how you would respond to the community.
Yeah, a couple things on that. So I often hear that we're only building apartments, and why aren't we looking at home ownership? And so I'll talk a little bit about that, because we have a down payment assistance program. We work with nonprofits that are doing the land bank model like we do for rentals, for home ownership as well. We just can't do the home ownership piece with the way Idaho laws work. And we need to do more, but I also saw the zoning code as the kind of market-based, yes, it takes a while approach to more homes that you could buy, that missing middle of, and right now we're trying to make it easier to have the plexes, so duplexes, triplexes, et cetera, because we inadvertently made that still a little bit more difficult. I hear you're only building apartments, you're not building homes, people want yards, where are kids gonna play, and all of these things, but again, the generational divide of that. And so especially when we're in the middle of zoning code updates, I talked about it, you know, on the front porches with people in terms of a home for Boiseans. Yes, people are moving here, we're growing rapidly, but our kids need homes too. And that always seemed to kind of get people to pause and reflect. On the apartment piece, I kind of take the same approach of, look, like, Scott and I didn't have parent help in our down payment. We were only able to buy a house because we could find an apartment that was only $700 a month when he made $52,000. And then we could save money and buy a house for $139,000 a year and a half later. We have to have more apartment homes so that people can find one at an affordable rent so that they can save money and then buy the house like we all want to. And then there's just a changing expectation of like the size of home and what neighborhoods look like, because at least in Boise, young people want to live in those neighborhoods, where I also talk about, like, we need more homes for more people, so people are living with and amongst us rather than driving through us. So let's bring people together, create the gathering places in parks and retail on the ground floors and safe pathways so that kids can run out the door, get to a park, know their neighbors, and just play before dinner. And with that, I find that as we talk about it in terms of what it means to live a good life, an affordable life in a safe and welcoming city, we can move through that in a way where those of us that share that vision, which is many more people than not, can help move these really tough political things through so that we can be that city for everyone.
Well, that's a great hopeful note to end on. Thank you, Mayor McLean. And let me just echo Sarah's, your team, the American Affordability Tracker is amazing. Highly recommend checking it out. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, everybody.